tweak something else, I gotta harvest that and look at it differently to realize I try something else. So that ultimately gets us to that end point, because after all the research, the segmentation, the targeting, the planning, the optimization, I'm going to know if it worked.
Did they actually do it?
Work.
Yeah.
Correct. And like I started the conversation, and we're managing two streams on it. I focused a little bit on the healthcare professional stream right there, but the patient stream is also happening too. Someone who is diagnosed and perhaps not on my product. Someone who is not diagnosed, but has characteristics or is doing research that makes them feel like they actually have the condition too. Like they're researching, they have yet to go to a doctor. Those kinds of streams too are also part of the total arc of our process to get to the end game, which is, again, our effort is to try to get people healthy.
Yeah, yeah. And know that with certainty, and for each of your segments you're identifying there. Yeah, and then also have confidence in how that marketing money is actually being spent on its efficacy, and got it. Yeah, cool. So we'll hear in a minute how that's going to change their business and their customer growth. Cool. And then Joe. So in your case, we talked about this customer health score. So kind of, you were talking about how you started with the, what was the example, the Star Trek, what did you call it?
Yeah, the tricorder.
Yeah, and then
wave it over you.
You're like, maybe we've gone a little too far here. Okay, and so take us through your learning curve of like what was how did you figure out what is the behavioral customer data that we want to measure? How did you kind of end up on an answer there?
Sure. So we had instances. I mean, we knew what an unhealthy customer looked like in the high-level space, the high touch we call it, where it's larger customers where we can spend the time and hands-on with them and figure out where the problems lie. And in that research, we did have some kind of half-baked health scores that we were starting, like very primitive stuff, just using spreadsheets, slapping all the data together. And something arose, and it wouldn't really come back around until later, where I just had this big, it almost looked like a sound wave or a pulse of their deployments over cancellations for their entire life cycle on the platform. And when a big issue hit, we knew what the issue was. We had been in meetings where they said, this is what caused us to deploy to your competitor. We hated this, and this is why this happened. It was astonishing. It looked like a sound wave, and then you could see exactly that point where things started going poorly.
How are you seeing this when you say you saw the sound wave thing?
So we track a lot of stuff, and this was maybe part of the journey and why I initially thought I could make the tricorder, is because we had 15 years worth of all this data, deployments,
customer behavior,
all the billing packages that people, like everything that's attached to a deploy versus cancellation. But when I say deploy, they have a little chunk or virtualized part of our server. We have a big bank of servers somewhere, and they can slice off a little chunk and start using it for whatever they want. By the very nature of our service, privacy is like kind of part of our DNA. So we don't really want to bug you. As long as you're not using that server to hurt people or do illegal things and we get wind of it, we kind of just want to leave you alone and let you do whatever you want, and we won't bug you or interfere. So that's kind of what led to this. Since we never had done it before, I was like, oh, sweet, we're just going to turn over rocks and find gold nuggets everywhere, and nobody has ever seen this stuff before. And the level of data we collected was so Linode-centric. It was all the stuff that we could see from the outside, but no behavioral, real stuff of what they're deploying internally. I was kind of stymied and hit a wall. So we got back to that by hitting a couple of correlational walls where we just couldn't find enough of the useful data to get a strong link between any behavior and growth and longevity on our platform. We had to get back to basics, and instead of building the tricorder, we just got back to taking the pulse and the very basic health metrics of a customer. And that for us is whether they made more things than they ripped off of their account over time. Yeah. And when I did that for a big customer where we knew where the fault was, the human eye is like drawn to patterns immediately like this. And it was so obvious where their health had taken a dip. So I think that was the most valuable insight I had on data in itself. It's not necessarily that data requires this complex overarching model with 100 factors and all that stuff. One of the biggest values of data is taking seemingly mundane things about normal life and looking at it either at an aggregate form or a zoomed out form, so you can learn things about normal behavior that you had no idea about before. So that's where the real breakthrough was for us. We stopped trying to over-engineer a health score and realized that if we take the pulse of each customer over time, and then we'll work on cross-sectioning that with other factors, whether they have a certain product of ours, or whether they're from a certain country, or whether they deploy WordPress stuff, or they use this for database stuff. That all has to come after. We have to actually get that real health proxy.
Yeah.
And, when we got that, it was like, duh, because I had already looked at that sound wave looking thing way back in the day. I'm like, why wouldn't that be the best? It literally looks like a pulse. How is that not the best thing to show customer health? It looks like a pulse. So we got back to that, and that's where we're really making breakthrough after breakthrough by simplifying and not overshooting to create some comprehensive. Not that I wouldn't want that. I mean, if I could have a 100-factor thing to diagnose everything, I would take it. And we'll maybe get there. But to start, to get to actionable intel, especially when you're just starting, you really have to bite smaller chunks and get to impact sooner. And simplicity is your friend there. Just find the thing that really makes sense as a proxy for whether they like your service or not, and go from there.
So can I build off that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what he's describing right there, Joe's describing right there, is also, I think, a challenge that we have. It's a data gap now. So I started by saying that our company and our purpose is trying to make healthier lives. When we, or if we could have access to that information, because right now it's disconnected from us. Your system is capturing what your system is capturing. I could perhaps use that to better find, better service, better find, and identify better help patients. If I knew this is where their pulse looks, something's wrong, cardiovascular, something's wrong, whatever, make sure I align you to the right resources, the right information, get the right products in front of you to help it. Make sure you connect you to the doctor too, right? And that there's a gap in there right now. The challenge I think that we have in that topic alone is now you get into a space of people are concerned around privacy, people are concerned around how you're using that data, what's the purpose of that, and also in certain conditions you actually want to completely avoid it. So in sensitive conditions, sensitive areas, you actually don't want to have that option. That's very personal information that people have, and it's not gonna bode well for the brand who's trying to help the patient, really. But if they're targeting them because of information they have from a test or result or knowledge that they have XYZ condition, that's not always a good thing. But if it's done with good purpose, with good intent, again, good intent of trying to make people healthy, live longer lives, live happier lives, then it's a gap that exists right now for us. We don't have good access to that. There are all these little silos that we don't have good connection to. We know it's data, we know it's there.
It's almost kind of like I was looking for all the stuff that you have, and now you're looking for all the stuff I have.
You guys should spend more time.
I'm Eugene. Nice to meet you.
So I was looking for the high-level metadata and fancy 100-factor thing, and I realized all I had was the basic pulse. So it's fine.
Yeah, there's, don't discredit yourself too much. I think there's something to be said for the one metric, right? And the one thing that's simple to understand. And I would imagine as you're walking around your company and you describe this metric now, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? You're not having to explain a big complex diagram of, and then you said something earlier too that particularly when you're building, SaaS, cloud, enterprise software type stuff, you'll get a lot of patterned advice and things like that. I think what's interesting in Linode's case is if you're building a SaaS app, like where I work at Guru, for us it's simple in the sense that we build a product that's designed for humans to use it, and so we go, are people using it? Good. Are they not anymore? Bad. Right? It's fairly straightforward in that regard, but. You were saying earlier, it's in some regards, using your product can sometimes actually mean like they're going in and having to do stuff that you don't want, right? So like non-use can almost be good in your case, right? Like is that, did I hear that right? Is that?
Yeah, and there are so many ways to consume our service. I mean, when you deploy a system, you can go through our API and run a script and say, every third of the month when I have this campaign, deploy 100 systems, and it's automated and scales. And, and then you really don't have to touch it unless something goes wrong. So, and then sometimes customers log in all the time and they're manually creating stuff and want to interact with our support team and stuff. Between those two customers, like how do you track whether logins or the frequency of interaction with our service is a good thing or a bad thing? We have customers who use us for $5 a month. We have customers who use us for thousands of dollars a month. And there's such we have so many things that we could measure, but so many different use cases that we would be quickly overwhelmed and everything would break and all the models wouldn't mean anything unless we kept it extremely simple and then cross-reference the after the fact. Because we just don't really know a ton about, or we haven't designed our system and people would prefer us not to know every little thing about what they're doing with their server. We just don't want to bug them. It's their apartment or whatever, if you want to use that metaphor. As long as you're not like breaking stuff and
you're making sure the plumbing and the electricity is good. Don't go in my apartment, please.
Right.
That's my stuff.
And then this is a part of it too, is coming closer to the customer and trying to figure out their use case. That's a challenge when we built this way. And we're trying to figure out whether customers want us to get that far or need us to come one more level. I mean, with our service, you still need to use a command line and things like that. So making it easier to consume comes out of this. If we get better intel on what they actually need from us, that's easier for us to figure out what to build next, to either get closer to the customer or just find more advantageous avenues for us to go. We want to build something that is useful, because that's a key part of this. People don't spin up a Linode just to, well, sometimes they spin it up to fool around and play buttons, but typically you have...
Data geeks, right.
Yeah, like us. But typically you have some goal, and if we can focus on that goal, and apparently our customers have thousands of goals, but if we can focus on those goals and better meet them, then we're doing right.
Yeah, it's like this idea, and you both said it in other ways, but all three of you, you can get overwhelmed with the amount of data that you can find and go get. And you can, you were saying like what questions do we actually want to answer? Like, and starting there, right? And like, that's such a common thread here, listening to all three of you. You're doing it for very different reasons, but you're all going like, all right, what's that like simple question I want to answer? And then go and get the data, right? Because you can, so many times, and I know I've done this, you can see a huge data set and like start putting like mode or like visualization tools on top of it and start looking at stuff and being like, cool, like, now what? Like, we have this, what is it actually telling us? And so, in all three of your cases, I think you've all done a thoughtful job of like going like, okay, why? Like, what is the thing that we want to know, and what are we going to do with it? And so, just to kind of like wrap us up here, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions. But what were your outcomes? And so we'll start with you, Ting. And so like as you're doing this like comprehensive, both focus as well as informational gathering, like qualitative discussions with folks. Can you maybe share it? It could be an anecdote or a story, an example. Like how did it change your thinking or your path from maybe where you were thinking, kind of going into it?
So when we started the product, so our product, like our first product, is a connected toy that you slide your tablet in, and it's an interactive like plush toy. We put like sensors, hardware in it, so you can like sense like kids like different interactions. Okay, so we know like this is something we wanted to create because like we like made a prototype, we showed it to people, and people love it. But then it's like, what's next? Like we create this like controller for kids that has the ability to sense different triggers, but what exactly we wanted to combine together? It's like, okay, A and B together, C and D together, and what do we show them? So those are the questions that we wanted to find out through all of the research, because that what really drives the development process, especially like as a early stage startup like us. So we don't have a lot of resource, like we don't have a lot of people working on it, we don't have a lot of fundings. So how can we manage to operate and create a great product with limited resource? And that is like what we need to be like more focused, like to go on the right direction. So yeah, like coming back to how research support the whole process, we actually did like multiple research through the whole development process. It's an iteration process. So in different stage, we look for different things, like validate our assumption from the last research if that is correct, and do we see new behavior arise from the new changes that we made in the product. So it's like this, like one after another, and the frequent testing was given. Like you don't need a bunch of people. There's like research show that like 6 to 8 people is enough to get what you need. Of course, like more the better, but like as for like qualitative data, like you actually don't need that many people, because you will find a pattern like after like 6 or 8 people, and the more you get is just like filling up the rest, like 20%.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I would say it's kind of like a balance through like how much like resource you have and what you need, and what is the most effective way to get it.
And I guess like a nuance you said there that I thought was interesting is like you're like 6 to 8, and then you tweak something because you saw a pattern come out, and then you do another. So you're kind of doing this in waves, and so it's kind of getting you to like the right product. I would assume much faster than like winging it almost, right, or just kind of guessing. So is that a good way to think of it? Like, and would you encourage that approach of like maybe just tweak one thing, right, and then just kind of test that change? And by the way, you don't have to do it with 48 people. You can just do it. You'll know quickly if it's right. Like, is that an accurate way to think about that?
Yes. I would say like a rapid method, like a lot of like iterations, and like I mean, like when you have like a bigger team, I think you have like more resource of like doing things right, because you have like so many like smart people around, and like you can like make a decision very fast and maybe like more accurate.
Sure.
But when you're managing with like a very small team, then you need these people, like the people like that join your research to be those minds to give you feedback. And yeah, I think that's pretty much. Yeah, you're right. You don't have necessarily the smartest people in the room at your disposal to go and say, hey, what do you think? And so you're actually just validating it with your customer behavior. Yeah, because like for those like research or like even like product development, you need people that is experienced in the field, and like those people you find and to join your research is those people that is experienced in a way, because that is their life. Yeah, so I will say like involve them like as often as you can, but don't like stress out too much, because it's really about the balance on like how much you can change and how much you want it to change. Because there's also a part of it is about like your own like creative decision as a creator. It's like a lot of time after like a round of data collection, you got like so many different feedback. It's like, oh no, I don't like my product is so broken. But it's like how to distill those like information and come to this solution. And sometimes you have to make some like subjective like decision to move forward. But then you can kind of like test it out in your next research.
Yeah, and you described looking for the patterns, right? I mean, that's. You're doing some number of these, and like there's things that are just sort of popping up over and over and over again, and you're like, okay, we're gonna dial that one in on the next go around. Yeah, awesome, cool. All right, Eugene. So really cool to kind of understand now and visualize how you're kind of that whole end-to-end process you talked about there, where you're developing theories around potential buyers, and then being able to actually see, yes, they went and did what we thought or didn't, and so we're going to double down on that segment and stop doing that one, right? So, maybe share for us the impact that's had on on your company? I mean, is that helping you acquire new customers much more easily now because you're just so much, like you're not just showing slides, you're like, listen, I have real data, I can show you how we help these other companies. You know, how do you like leverage the success you found in this approach?
Yeah, it's redefined our company actually. The power of that information, the power of the data has changed the course in which we are positioned to our clients. So we happen to think that what I described right there is the client business success trajectory. And the best way that we feel to align to that is in a full partnership mentality with that success. So in the advertising world, what you typically have is you have agencies that will charge their clients based on how much the client spends, or how much it's going to take for how many people and what level and what seniority, and like that's how they charge them. Which in our mind is really basically no accountability to whether or not it worked or didn't work, right? So with
and
data,
why is that, by the way? Is that because they're not as focused on one specific, you know, problem as you are, right? Are they selling, you know, all different industries and verticals, so they can't get as precise as you? Why are
what's
they?
the old adage? Like, you know, I know where 50% of my advertising is working, where 50% is not working.
Yeah.
I just know which.
I should know which one.
Right. So that's the mentality that a lot of agencies have. So data has changed that environment for us to the place where it has, again, redefined our business model with our clients. In one where we actually have an engagement or type of a style of engagement with our clients where we pay for everything. Our own pocket.
What do you mean by that?
Right. We pay for all the advertising, all the promotion, and the client doesn't. Where before, everywhere else, the client pays for the budget, the advertising, the ads, everything. That's their money, that's their budget, that's their funding, right? But now, with the power of that data, power of us knowing the success or not success happening, we know that we can change that behavior. We know that we have the ability to actually influence the effect there. So therefore, we're able to put our own money to the table. And again, 100% of our own money. So client, instead of you paying us on a percentage of your spend, or you paying us on how much I cost or someone costs on my team, don't pay us. Pay us when we actually change your business.
Wow.
Pay us when we actually move your brand. Pay us when we actually make patients healthier. Pay us when doctors prescribe your product and they won't try nothing else before. Because that's what we're all about, right? So it has kind of redefined us as an agency.
Wow.
How we position ourselves to our clients, how we position ourselves to the marketplace, and it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for the data.
Yeah. So the data literally is your revenue channel. That's the data that you're then using to generate your bill for your customer.
Correct.
But it's so connected to value, which is amazing and so rare.
Correct.
In your industry, like, yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, so I mean, it has altered our business.
Yeah.
And I know the second part of this panel was around like how does it affect your business? That is a major effect.
Yeah. That's a big effect. Yeah, that's highly impactful. Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Cool. And Joe, you know, same thing to you, right? So now you've got your V1 pulse, and you iterated a lot. You landed on it, and kind of tell us now what has measuring that meant for Linode? How is it now helping you? And maybe it's churn or expansion, or maybe it's other ways it's impacted your business. But you know, tell us now that we have that. This is now possible.
Sure. Yeah, so when we first started out, those customers that I started talking to were kind of unicorns on our platform, right? There was just a group of people that reached the heights that typical customers just wouldn't naturally. They were just kind of sprouting up out of the crowd. So the intention there was to find what made them unique, what made them that successful on our platform, and then capture that fire and bring it to the rest of the customer base, right? That was the best way we could do it if we started from the top down like that. And this was such a key requirement for us to be able to even think about doing that, that now those cohorts of customers that outperform the next 100 or 1,000 customers by like tens of percents, 40, 50%, sometime year over year, we can now find those unique factors and put in, I guess, interact with customers at the right time, that we can deliver those special factors that made them unique. So for my team to start with just me, and now we're scaling out, we can't just do that with more heads. We need to automate and create different levels of interaction with the customer base. Without this health score, there's no way we could define which industries or which types of customers are best fit for this type of approach, where some may just be a one-way model where we just take what's cool about our, let's say, quarterly reviews with the big customers, and we just put a slideshow together and send it one way to a bunch of customers and say, here's what you guys spent, here's what you guys are doing, here's your progress to your milestones. To even know if that's going to be effective, or if even in that high echelon, whether they even care to talk to us face to face. We don't have any of that information without having some baseline metric of their health and understanding how that reflects back on their industry. So we wouldn't be able to touch the amount of customers we would need to touch without like having a 1,000-person department without this metric and health score.
And to make sure I understand the real core point there, are you saying that this data is telling you which folks to be spending your time with?
That, and also whether it worked. So we can talk to a customer after we sent them or worked with them on a project hands-on and say, hey, did you guys get what you aimed for? How's your quarter looking? Are you guys on your pathway to your milestones and stuff like that? But to test if an email campaign or an internal churn reduction campaign worked for 10,000 customers, there's no way we can call them all up and say, hey, was that awesome, or did it stink?
I see.
Right, so this also allows us to verify, retest, throw things out that didn't work, and reiterate that would have been never possible with just the hands-on stuff. So.
Okay, so now you have your score. Now you have your score, and you've got folks who aren't scoring so well, and you're like, okay, we're going to try this email campaign. Now you actually know definitively if, okay, we did this email campaign, this chunk of folks, their health went up, because before you did this, you're totally guessing, right? You have no idea.
Or we're looking by hand. So both targeting and verification aren't possible at scale without this very basic, seemingly mundane stat that we can look at a macro level now. To know who to talk to and whether it worked is at the core of what we have to do. And if we're going to be a 5 to 10 person team versus a 1,000-person team, just calling a bunch of people and saying, hey, how you doing and what can we help you with? So yeah, it was really a huge breakthrough for us. With the results we've seen from the hands-on stuff, this means that we can now replicate all that work out in a larger scale, and it's dramatic. It's phenomenal when you really see this stuff work and you do it the right way. It almost becomes this natural force that starts waving through the customer base.
That's awesome. And you said it before, but like the idea that you started by going like, okay, we know what good looks like. So we know these 3 customers are awesome. Okay, so now let's look at their data like pattern and all the behavior they did, and now let's have that kind of inform and decide what good looks like. Now, I think it's a real thoughtful approach. So awesome. Cool. Well, we've reached the end. I think we've heard what I thought were 3 really amazing, very different perspectives on how data is making real, meaningful, noticeable change and impact to their respective businesses. So please join me and thank our panelists for their time today. Thanks. And they'll be here sticking around for a while if anyone has questions. Thank you.
You know, I just actually